You're listening to the American edition of The Voice of Russia. I'm Ric Young in Washington. On the line from Moscow, our Voice of Russia correspondent and commentator, Dmitry Babich. Dmitry, how are you?
Doing fine. Nice to hear from you.
Interesting story. Obviously, we know that a couple of days ago that one of the Russian billionaires, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, was released from jail after 10 years in jail. But there's some controversy over some of the comments he's made regarding Russian political prisoners and that he's not going to be in political life. Can you sort this out for us?
Well, first, it was quite unexpected that Mr. Khodorkovsky, instead of staying in Russia and probably meeting his fans and his possible supporters in Moscow or in the provincial Karelian town where he was imprisoned, he immediately, by secret plane, he went to Germany. And all of his statements that we heard from him, where he explained his position, they all came from his press conference in Germany. And it was just very interesting to hear that Khodorkovsky was not going to participate in political life in Russia. He was not going to try to retrieve the assets that his company, Yukos, has lost as a result of the tax case that was started against it back in 2003. He just said that he wanted his other friends, his colleagues from Yukos, also to be released, so he would devote his efforts to getting them out of jail. He didn't even call them political prisoners, actually, in that press conference. And in my opinion, if you want my opinion on this issue, there are no people in Russia who sit in jail for convictions or for voicing their political convictions. There are some people sitting for their actions. But unfortunately, in just about every country in the world, you have people sitting in jail for certain actions that they did, guided by their political beliefs. So actually what Khodorkovsky did was very disappointing to a lot of his fans because they expected him to become, some even said, presidential candidate, others said, the main financier of Russian opposition, primarily liberal opposition, of course. But what was interesting was that Khodorkovsky also promised not to finance Russian political opposition. So right now, it looks like a 100% victory in terms of PR, 100% victory of President Vladimir Putin.
Well, why was Khodorkovsky flown to Berlin? Is that known? Why?
Well, we can only guess that it was his desire because he thanked the former German foreign minister, Hans-Dietrich Genscher, for organizing this operation. A lot of simple Russians who supported Khodorkovsky were disappointed because, in general, in order for average Russian to go to Germany, you must go through all kinds of red tape with visas. You must make an application 3 months in advance. You must prove that you are going to return to Russia after your visa expires. You must bring some papers from your work that you have a job, that you have links to Russia. And Khodorkovsky didn't need anything of that. He just quickly went to a location where there was a small private jet waiting for him, and he flew directly to Berlin. So my understanding is that the Western media was just wrong on Khodorkovsky. They wanted him to be some kind of Russian Nelson Mandela. And they created that image for him, that he is so strong, that he sits in jail for his convictions 10 years. And in reality, Khodorkovsky had never been politically active before 2003 when he started financing basically, I would say, sometimes extremist political parties in Russia. He financed, for example, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, which is in fact a neo-Stalinist formation. So he also financed a couple of liberal parties. He financed Yabloko. But even the fact that he financed several parties at the same time showed that he viewed politics pragmatically. For him, it was not defending his convictions. It was just finding a way to influence, to get political influence in the Duma. So if you look at his whole biography, he was the typical Russian oligarch of the 90s who sat quiet politically during most of the 90s. He just accumulated that huge wealth. He took hold of all of these oil assets, in Siberia. So his fortune was many billions. He tried to sell it to ExxonMobil, and it was clear that this deal could be struck. So this was one of the reasons for his quarrel with Putin. Then he quarreled with Putin, and he probably did not expect to be put in jail. He was the richest person in Russia. And, with rich people, you seldom have strong popular support for them because people remember how fortunes were made in the 90s. And of course, now he behaved also like a typical oligarch. As soon as there was a chance to get out of jail, he quickly jumped into a plane and he went abroad where he can't be arrested for stealing anything in Russia. So this is in fact a very typical life story of a Russian oligarch, robber baron, as they were called by George Soros, when he was angry at Russian oligarchs in the 90s. I don't find anything romantic or any kind of human rights activism about him. The fact that he wants his friends to be out of jail, well, criminals also want their friends to be out of jail. Sometimes they call them political prisoners in order to get them out of jail. So I would say it's a typical story of a strong person who is interesting as a character, who obviously has a lot of guts, to achieve his aims, but he achieved these aims for himself, not for the people, and certainly not for Russia.
Well, according to Reuters, they're writing that the Kremlin has given Khodorkovsky public assurances that he's free to return to Russia, but he's saying he will not do that at this time because there's no guarantee he would be able to leave again. Since he's already been released and the Kremlin has said you can come back to Russia, why would there be this reluctance then?
Well, because he knows that he committed a lot of things in Russia which can land him in jail again, probably. That's my explanation. The Russian president's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, said that Khodorkovsky is free to return to Russia. His fans expected Khodorkovsky to be in Moscow with them right now and to talk to people, maybe to participate in some kind of a rally. But I think that they just misinterpret him as a character. He was never about public politics. He was never open. If you look at his face during press conference, if you listen to his answers, he always, he's always smiling, but he is always very closed. You never know really what he has on his mind. He is always calculating. And I think that he's just afraid. You have similar stories in the United States. Show me a criminal who doesn't think that there are justifying circumstances for his crime. We just discussed, this case about a killer in Boston, a mafia boss who killed a lot of people back in the 70s and the 80s. And remember, he was saying that he did it for the community. He couldn't betray his friends. He wants his friends out of jail. You always have this kind of language from the criminals. The special thing with Khodorkovsky was that 100% of international press bought it, and they repeated all of his usual justifications, which sound very much like what we heard from these Boston mafia bosses about friends and being together and never betraying your friends and, fighting for freedom and raising from poor beginnings.
It'll be interesting to see what happens next in this case. I'm sure that this is not the last we'll hear from him or that situation. As always, Dmitry, a pleasure, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.